it was written in 1949, which is right after World War II and in the midst of the Cold War, when the entire world's future was in question of the grim prediction of what the world could look like in 1984.
1984 is honestly one of my favorite books. I believe it's one of the best books I've ever written. So, as we mentioned, the book was written by George Orwell. Now, it's extremely important to also understand what kind of life George Orwell lived. George Orwell was a revolutionary writer, and he had a life that contributed to that. So, Jehan will be telling you a little bit about that. And the reason it's still considered such a revolutionary piece of literature even today, it was written about 80 years ago. The reason even today it's considered still relevant, kids are taught this book, is because it warns against a particular future, and the fact remains we are still at risk of that future today.
So George Orwell is basically the pen name of Eric Arthur Blair. He was born in India during the British occupation and spent his childhood in England and Southeast Asia. So during these times he witnessed colonialism and social class inequality. All of these heavily influenced all of his writings. And another important period was when he went to Burma and he was in the Indian Imperial Police Force. So over there he saw the suppression of the Burmese and felt increasingly ashamed. Eventually he quit and went back to England to pursue writing full time. And in his lifetime he also witnessed the Spanish Civil War and Stalinist Russia. All these were totalitarian regimes. So these influences other writings like Animal Farm.
So 1984 is set in Britain. Now this Britain is shown to be a part of a larger state called Oceania. So now in this book it depicts a post-war world in which it shows that the entire world has been ravaged by nuclear war. So here I just like you to consider this was written in the Cold War, a time when the entire world was worried this could be a very imminent reality. So he is suggesting that the nuclear war did happen, the entire world was ravaged by it. And in that future, what he's describing is that the world is divided, all the countries are divided into 3 major states, and all 3 of them are constantly at war with each other. So now, this Oceania is where it's based. It shows it to be a totalitarian state. So like Jehan mentioned, a totalitarian state is where one ruling party controls every aspect of the citizens' lives. The citizens have no autonomy or freedom or control. So now this Oceania is represented by a government called the Party. This party is represented by the face of Big Brother. So now Big Brother, it's a man whose face appears everywhere, on every posters on every single wall. Imagine this entire wall being covered with posters, on all your coins, on every kind of propaganda, you see one face, the face of Big Brother, and underneath it, there is one phrase called Big Brother is watching you. And even today, 80 years later, whenever people talk about unethical surveillance, about surveilling people against their will, about any kind of that, the first phrase that comes to mind is still Big Brother is watching us, becomes synonymous with that. So now, the reason for this is, Big Brother is watching you. In this society, these citizens are monitored every single moment of the day. How do they do this? They have telescreens. Telescreen is what Orwell imagines. It's quite similar to what televisions would be like, except it not only broadcasts, it also receives. So everywhere, in public, in your own homes, in your offices, in the streets, there are these telescreens that can pick up on all sound and can pick up video. So basically, you're being monitored when you're walking down the street, you're being monitored when you're in your house, you're being monitored while you're sleeping. That's why they are under constant surveillance. Picks up on every movement and on every sound. It will be in the forests as well, not just the city. So in this society, it's shown that the government controls, like I said, controls every aspect of people's lives and brainwashes them to dedicate themselves to this party, the government. So these people believe the party to be their savior. They are utmost devotees of the party, while at the same time this party is waging a war that never ends. So the protagonist of this book is a man called Winston Smith. He's a member of this party, but he's amongst the outer ranks. So he works in the Ministry of Truth, where, as the irony goes, his job is to rewrite records. He rewrites records in history so that he can say, the party instructs him what they want history to say, and it's his job to change every existing version of that record to say what the party wants them to say, which means people have no idea what people can think of nothing aside from what the party tells them. So basically the premise of the book is focusing on how Winston is discontent with the party. He's a member of the party, he's a citizen, but he doesn't agree with their ideologies. However, the society is so structured that any kind of disagreement, any kind of rebellious thought means not only torture, it means certain death. That's the premise.
So in this book, we see that the party is trying to replace the language English by something called Newspeak. Now, the fundamental aim of Newspeak is to reduce the amount of words that there are. Right? Now, this is a very interesting concept. I can kind of summarize it in one line. If you don't know the word freedom, you can't demand freedom. Right? That's the whole premise behind this new language called Newspeak. And there's another concept called thought crime. So what thought crime is basically, it's a concept that if you even think about something, it's considered to be a crime. So in this book, we see examples of people going into jail. They haven't done anything. They just blabbered some stuff against the party in their sleep, right? And the party was like, look, you had bad thoughts about us. You had thoughts about rebellion. We will put you in a camp and jail, etc., etc. So the book follows Winston, as she mentioned, the protagonist Winston. It follows Winston's attempts to kind of keep his discontent hidden. And he performs very simple acts of rebellion, such as writing in a diary, and eventually even goes on to fall in love. Now, we would like to end it with the summary of the book right here, because we don't want to give anything away. We want you guys to go and read it. We want you to see what happens, who he falls in love with. Is it a Cinderella ending? Is it a bad ending? We want you guys to be curious. So now we both will speak about some stuff that we took away from this book. So to me, it's a cautionary tale. George Orwell was basically saying that, it's an extreme imagination of what a government can do, if it comes to it. The main part was the importance of independent thought and free speech.
So right now the themes that Jehan talked about were independent speech and mass surveillance. So I'm just going to take away a few other themes that I picked up on. You look at the world today, you look at even our country, almost all newspapers, all news channels are known to be propaganda. They're known to be owned by either political parties or influential people. They very much control what is said about them, and they have been known to wipe out all mentions of any kind of opposing views of point. That is still happening today. So I believe that propaganda still exists very much today, and it's important for all of us to recognize that. Now, another theme is censorship. Censorship is quite commonly tied in with propaganda, etc. So now, again, all I'm trying to do right now is to try to get us to think कि अपने दुनिया में ये कहाँ हो रहा है, अपने country में कहाँ हो रहा है. Censorship is so common, so we think, all of us today, the fact that we have this capacity to have this discussion is free speech. But there is the fact that there are people out there. Free journalism is rare today, but there are still people who are trying to do it, and there are still critics and journalists who are being thrown in jail for it. And it's happening in this country. In October 2023, which was, to give you some context, 6 months ago, in India, the houses of 46 journalists were raided because they criticized the BJP. This is still happening in our country. Rewriting of the past was something which I read, it struck me the most because it seemed ridiculous. The past is all we have to go on. Except, I looked into it, and turns out world over countries have been accused of modifying their textbooks, what they're teaching their children. They are modifying history to say what they want to say. It's happened in, there are some countries, it's happened in Israel, it's happened in, I believe, in Iran. The leading parties were accused of changing their textbook. It is mentioned the atrocities that the government had done. But in India itself, last year, BJP was accused of modifying textbooks in Delhi to remove mentions of Islam and to remove mentions of Gandhiji's views against Hindu nationalism. This is happening in our country itself. What our children are being taught is being changed. Facts are being changed in our country itself. The reason, like I said, the reason I believe this book to be revolutionary is because in an isolated capacity, we tend to ignore these things that are happening around us. When I said the news is propaganda, half the people here nodded. When I said critics are being arrested world over, half the people here nodded. All of us know this. all of us know that our internet activity is being tracked and our phones are likely listening to us. But we मान लिया दुनिया ऐसी है क्या होगा? Today I might mention Paris and I open my phone and my phone is recommending a trip to Paris and I don't think twice about it. Tomorrow I'm in my room and I mention that I'm not liking what the government is doing right now, and that night the government throws me in jail. That's the difference between today them monitoring me and it not mattering to me versus tomorrow them monitoring me and controlling my life over it. That's the reason we need to take attention of it. It's a reminder to think for ourselves. It's a reminder to take notice of what is happening in the world around us. Because if we don't, we are the ones sacrificing our own freedom. So that's my take on the book. I just like to finish by giving you one of my favorite quotes from the book. One of my favorite quotes of Orwell actually. The further a society drifts away from truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. Thank you.